Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeateron, and today we're going to be doing another tier list. This is going to be another disturbing movies tier list. I did one of these pretty much when daylight savings came, because daylight savings really messed me up and I just wanted to put out a fun video, and a lot of people seem to like it. A lot of people suggested that I do other horror movies, maybe more conventional ones, or maybe just doing a disturbing list that's just solely based on how good they are rather than how disturbing they are. Something can be extremely disturbing, but can be awful. There's plenty of really awful disturbing movies where they're low quality, they have no acting, the special effects suck, they're just doing something that's depraved and messed up and gross and weird. So this list will just be based on how good the movies actually are. Tell me if you're enjoying these kind of random tier lists as well. I really like making them. They're a lot of fun to talk about. This time I chose 20-ish movies to talk about. I do have more that I could put up here if you guys want to see a part 2, part 3, whatever it might be. And I'll be going through each of these, telling you kind of what makes them disturbing, what could make them enjoyable, and where I would rank them on this score, S being the absolute best, where they are still really good movies even though they might have a disturbing factor or two, down to D where they're probably not very good and they probably just got notoriety for just being disturbing. So let's begin. Our very first one here is Would You Rather. I will be showing at least 1 or 2 images from the movie too somewhere over here on the screen. Would You Rather is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a game of Would You Rather, where you get 2 options, usually both of them bad options, in this game hosted by a very eccentric millionaire where you could win millions of dollars if you are the last one standing. Or the person who completes the most. So these challenges range from anything that's super mundane to something that's very dangerous and could potentially kill you, which does of course happen in the movie. It is a horror movie after all. I mean, right here you can see a razor blade in an eye, which that is technically true. There is a scene that it does involve a razor blade in an eye, but it's not particularly graphic. It's very cut short, at least that scene is. So minor spoiler to that, but these games range anything from, like, you're a vegetarian and I'll pay you $50,000 to eat a piece of steak or something, all the way up to, you can pick to be beaten by a stick by another person or something, or something like you can hold on to a firework as it explodes in your hand. A lot of different things. There isn't really a whole lot that makes this movie super disturbing or really that great. The acting is okay. Everything about it is just kind of okay. It's an okay horror movie that's not too long. You can pop it in and watch it. I think I remember watching this somewhere on Netflix or something online, and it wasn't bad. It's decent overall. Not too far out there for most people. If you're looking for a casual horror movie, it's fine, but I'm going to put it in C tier. Alright, up next we have Tokyo Gore Police. This is kind of a strange one. I remember watching this a couple years ago. I don't know where I found it online. I found it somewhere. It's a Japanese movie that is very steeped in a lot of blood, gore, and body horror. And that's really about it for the movie. If you like seeing really cool practical effects, it actually does have some really great ones, especially with all of the freaks and mutants that it has in it. A lot of them are made very, very grotesquely, very creepy. It has a lot of very creepy imagery, but this movie never takes itself very seriously. It's never like a normal horror movie or anything like that where there's all sorts of messed up stuff going on and everybody's horrified by it. It's honestly more entertaining than anything. It's just, look at all these cool special effects that we have, all of the weird blood, guts, and gore that we have just going everywhere. And that's really about it for the movie. If that sounds fun to you, if you really like practical effects, if you really like just lots of blood and gore and kind of silly stuff going on, then you'll probably like this movie. If not, then you're probably not going to like it, because it doesn't really have much in terms of a story, acting, anything like that. It's pretty much just a complete display of weird and grotesque kind of art stuff. I don't really want to say the movie is very artsy, because it's arguably sort of, but also not, I guess. So this one's kind of a strange one to rate. I would probably put this one also in C tier, above Would You Rather, because I'd much rather rewatch Tokyo Gore Police just for the spectacle of it. Alright, so up next we have Where the Dead Go to Die. This is an animated feature. I found this, I believe, when I was looking through various disturbing animation sites, and I remember people requesting me to do a review on this when I was doing movie reviews fairly frequently. This was something people were saying was super messed up, super disturbing, and super bizarre, which all those are kind of true. That being said, it's not a good movie by any means. Where the Dead Go to Die is a horror anthology, sort of. It's based on multiple people within the same area experiencing different things. These things can range anywhere from like demonic stuff just popping up out of nowhere to almost fevered acid dreams. I'm not even sure what they are. To just all sorts of really messed up and depraved things. The only problem with this, though, is that the animation quality is absolutely terrible in this movie. It looks awful for when it was made. It's so cheesy. That really detracts from how disturbing it is. I mean, yeah, a lot of the acts that are done on screen are really messed up, but when they're done this poorly, the voice acting is another thing. The voice acting is really bad in this movie, to the point of really being hilarious. This is a very bad movie, but it isn't always a bad fun movie either. It's got sparks of it that do make it funny to watch, and if you take parts of it out of context and, maybe just redo those parts in a compilation, it could be rather entertaining. But you do have to sit through, I believe, about a 90-minute movie to get through this. And for those couple scenes, it's really not worth it. This movie is pretty bad, and not even super bad that it's good or anything. It's just pretty bad. Where the Dead Go to Die goes into D tier. Our next movie here is VHS 2. This is another horror anthology. This is multiple different stories being told through VHS tapes to the audience. Now, there is an overarching story that ties this all together. In this one, it's two private investigators trying to find a lost student. And they go into their apartment or their dorm, whatever it might be, and then start looking through VHS tapes to kind of get a better idea of what's going on. So we watch each of these tapes, and each tape is made by a different director. So this movie can feel very much like a mixed bag. So this one ranges from stories from like a zombie outbreak in a remote woods, all seen from a GoPro footage of the zombie, which is quite interesting. It has a section of a man getting a new prosthetic eye implanted into his head to where you can see directly from his perspective, and him start seeing glitches and creepy things showing up in his eye. And of course, it's got the best section, which is the crazy cult that's being filmed. Definitely check out that short if you're looking for anything. That short alone would easily go up to A or S tier. That one is really good. Some of the other ones are still pretty decent to watch. The last one is honestly the weakest, where it's the aliens and the really annoying kids, where it's just bad. That part of VHS is bad. The rest of it, though, is really good. So I would definitely recommend VHS 2, and I'd probably put it into B tier. It's definitely going to be a mixed bag. Our next movie here is The Collection. This is a sequel to The Collector, which I will probably put on a later list if you guys want to see more of these. This is a story about a Saw-like killer, or I guess Jigsaw-like killer from the Saw series. This is a serial killer that likes to put people in horrific traps, or at least trap an entire area and try to see if they can get through it. This one, like I said, is the sequel to the original Collector, where we're still following the main character from the first one, but now he's in this one trying to go through the Collector's building full of traps. And it can get pretty creepy. It can get pretty gross too. It has a very interesting starting scene with a giant, almost combine-like harvester being placed inside of a nightclub, which is a spectacle to see. This one is actually pretty fun. I do like going back and watching this one every once in a while. It's not perfect. It does have some issues. The pacing is a little bit strange. Not all the acting's the best. Some of the special effects are a little bit questionable, mostly those involving like CGI touch-ups. All the practical effects look really good in this. And a lot of the atmosphere is really good in this too, just being genuinely creepy. I would put the collection probably up into B tier. It's pretty decent and a pretty fun horror movie to watch. All right, then we've got Tetsuo the Iron Man. This is a very bizarre movie. This is another Japanese movie. This is a movie about a man who gets infected with pretty much technology, more or less. He starts becoming this Iron Man, becoming more and more robotic and having weird technological growths on him, replacing his human parts. This is also filmed in a very bizarre way where it's almost all stop motion and sped up fast motion, and a lot of it's in black and white. It's very weird. It's definitely a unique movie. I've seen very few movies like Tetsuo the Iron Man. It brings up some very interesting questions. This one is kind of disturbing for a couple reasons. One is its presentation, where it's just bizarrely shot and bizarrely presented. The other part is the body horror that comes up a lot. If you can handle body horror, then I would at least recommend taking a look at some of the shots from Tetsuo the Iron Man and reading a synopsis of it. Watching it can be a little bit difficult, I would say, because it is just so weird, but I kind of like that. I'm going to put this one also into B tier, above the collection, but for different reasons. The collection is a far easier story just to watch through and is pretty decent all the way through. Tetsuo the Iron Man is just a completely crazy story that I'm glad it exists, but man, is it weird. Up next, we have Hellraiser. Hellraiser is a pretty classic movie. A lot of people know about this movie, but it's based on a Clive Barker book. This is about a man who is playing with a puzzle box that he found that will give him great power. Of course, it doesn't. It summons creatures from another dimension. Demons, or whatever you might call them, the Cenobites. A woman, his former lover, now wants to resurrect him by getting him various sacrifices for him to come back. He starts out as a skeleton and then gradually gets more and more human parts to him before we actually see the Cenobites. A lot of people know this for Pinhead and think Pinhead's in the movie a lot. He's not. He's only in a very little bit of it. So if you're just going there to see Pinhead, he's not in the majority of the story and is honestly only a little portion of it. Hellraiser is still an amazing movie, though. I really love it. It's very gory, very gross to see a lot of this stuff. A lot of the practical effects look absolutely amazing in Hellraiser, especially in Hellraiser 2 as well. We might talk about that one in a different video. Hellraiser is just an all-around really fun movie. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend seeing it. It does get rather gross at parts. Again, it kind of focuses on not necessarily body horror, but body modification, more forced modification. With things like hooks, which aren't the most pleasant to see. All right, up next we have Requiem for a Dream. This is a very depressing movie. This is disturbing not for the same reasons as a lot of movies. This doesn't have intense violence or very messed up undertones or anything. This is just a simple story about various people going through drug addiction and what they will go to chase those highs, whatever it might be, and seeing how this can really hurt people, where you follow pretty much a group of people, the main one being played by Jared Leto, where he has a drug addiction. You see his girlfriend, who also has a drug addiction, his best friend, who also has a drug addiction, and his mother, who gains a drug addiction. It's a very stylish movie. It's very interesting to watch. It's very sad, though. It's very depressing. This is definitely going to be one of the more mainstream disturbing movies, because a lot of people know about this one, and it is extremely good, but it is really sad to watch through, and I probably wouldn't watch it again just because of that, but still a great movie, and I'd probably put it into A tier. All right, up next we have Audition. This is another very well-known movie. This is a Japanese horror movie, sort of. It's more of a Japanese romance mystery movie that kind of turns into a horror movie towards the end of it. So this movie is about a widower who recently lost his wife, or at least at the very start of the movie, recently lost his wife, and then many years later is considering putting himself back out in the dating scene and figures that him and his friend could hold an audition, disguising this as a job so that he can get better acquainted with the women and then try to date them. He then meets this girl who seems to have a very strange and mysterious past. Most of this movie is honestly not all that disturbing or creepy. The first half of the movie really isn't. It's much more of a mystery, drama, and romance movie, more so than a horror movie. It's really only the last 30 minutes that turn into a horror movie. Because, and spoiler alerts to anybody who is looking forward to this movie, now is your time to kind of skip ahead a little bit. Turns out the girl is crazy. And that there's been a lot of very messed up stuff going on behind the scenes, or at least implied. There's some weird stuff that also may or may not have happened. It might be hallucinations, as we kind of find out, which are a little bit strange. And then, of course, the finale is rather creepy and kind of disturbing. So Audition, overall, I actually really like the movie Audition. It's a very good movie. It's only really the last 30 minutes that turn it into a disturbing movie. Overall, I would put Audition probably up into A tier, though. It's a pretty decent movie overall. Alright, up next, it's Pink Flamingos. This is another well-known disturbing movie. It's disturbing for different reasons, though. This is strictly a comedy, but it's a comedy in pretty poor taste, I would say, or a comedy in bad taste. This was directed by John Waters. This is one of his first movies, and this is about a group of people that are trying to win the filthiest person alive title award thing, that has anything from stealing random stuff at the store to eating really disgusting stuff to going into any sort of taboo subject you could think of. And then also the main characters, I guess, rival are a group of people that kidnap women to have their children to sell their children. This is all done in a very comedic way, though. It's not done in any sort of serious way. So there's not a whole lot there. It's mostly just the super gross factor of Pink Flamingos. That being said, it is still a pretty admirable movie from John Waters because this was one of his first ones. You can see where he got a lot of his inspiration from and where he learned a lot from, as well as chose some really great music to put in. There are a lot of funny moments in this, but there is a lot of really gross out stuff in it. Overall, I'd probably put Pink Flamingos at the bottom of C tier. Now for probably the most well-known movie on this list, The Exorcist. Pretty much everybody knows about The Exorcist. It's a 12-year-old girl that is possessed by some sort of demon or entity, and her mother seeks out help from two priests to try to save her. This movie is absolutely fantastic. Everything about it is amazing. It's still incredibly creepy and it's incredibly uncomfortable to watch. Even this many years later, it's still amazing. A lot of the shots in this movie are incredibly iconic, and this movie is still fantastic even to today. I would recommend The Exorcist to anybody that has any interest in horror movies, and especially in some ways disturbing movies too. It goes right up to S tier. Alright, up next we have American Mary. This is a disturbing movie that pops up on a lot of people's lists as recommendations for people just getting into disturbing movies, and I think that's fair. This is a story about Mary, who is training to be a doctor. She is a current medical student, and then is attacked and assaulted by those who she trusts. So she starts taking jobs in underground markets to do body modifications to people. These are all willing people, though, for the body modifications until later. And these are kind of simple-ish operations, I guess. Turning somebody into a Barbie doll, for example. The disturbing factor from this mostly comes from the body modification. Changing one's appearance, whether this be things, like I said, turning somebody into a Barbie doll. Altering their appearance, doing something like a split tongue or various piercings and stuff. That's those type of body modifications. This one does have some very interesting scenes, and a lot of it I actually did like. The first half of it I really liked. towards the second half is kind of where it fell apart for me. Where you just kind of get a twist villain out of nowhere that wasn't even introduced in the movie until the very end. I felt that was really out of place, and some of the other parts in it also seemed a bit out of place. It does have some disturbing parts to it. It does have some mostly off-screen suggested things that had happened to various characters, including Mary and her attackers. But overall, I enjoyed American Mary all right. I would probably put it about in the middle of B tier. It's not a bad movie to check out. All right, up next is Martyrs. This is another pretty well-known movie. This is from the French horror wave that was coming out in the mid-2000s. This is a story about a young woman who was abused and tortured when she was younger, trying to find the people that did this to her and trying to figure out the reasons why. This culminates in her finding the people who were responsible, punishing them, and then finding out more about their plan and where else this will go. This is a very sad and very depressing movie as well. It is also very disturbing in terms of imagery. A lot of it is very difficult to watch. There is graphic scenes of torture. There is a lot of really bleak stuff that happens throughout Martyrs. But all that being said, this is a fantastic movie too. This is another movie that I would easily recommend to anybody who is interested in all at really good horror movies. This one can be difficult to watch. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. Apparently there is a American remake of this, and it's pretty weak compared to the French version. Apparently they changed the second half of the movie. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But Martyrs, the French version, is fantastic all the way through. I would highly recommend Martyrs, and Martyrs is going right up into S tier. Going from one French movie to another, we have High Tension, or Switchblade Romance, or half a dozen other names that it goes by. This is a horror movie about two best friends going to one of their parents' houses and then are attacked by a serial killer. This killer is extremely brutal and extremely graphic in a lot of his kills. This movie then continues on with one of the characters being kidnapped, the other character trying to save them, and all of the things that happen in this giant spree of horror. This movie is super graphic. It's very gory. It's very bloody, and it is pretty uncomfortable to watch at times. That being said, the second half of this is rather disappointing. It had a lot of promise in the very first half of the movie, but in the second half, it really just kind of falls on its face. And that's disappointing. I would have liked to see this one continue and actually end with at least an alright ending, in my opinion. So High Tension is probably going to go in the middle of B tier. Up next, we have Solo, or The 120 Days of Sodom. This is a well-known horror movie from the 70s, and very disturbing movie. This movie takes place during World War II, where a bunch of Italian fascists decide to round up a bunch of young people in their late teens, early 20s, and pretty much torture them for their own pleasure and do all sorts of gross and disgusting things to these people and to themselves, just for their own enjoyment. That's the main synopsis of this movie. There are quite a few people that like this movie and see that it's super artistic and has a commentary of World War II fascism. I don't really see that. This movie is awful, in my opinion. It's, at least for me, it's extremely boring. It's very gross. Most of the comedic scenes really don't work for me that are supposed to be comedic. Most of the drama parts really aren't dramatic. It's just, it feels like a series of events that's sort of just happening where you know how the ending's going to go. Definitely not one of my favorites. Definitely not one that I would recommend, and it's going into D tier. It's definitely better than Where the Dead Go to Die, but that's a pretty low bar. Up next, we have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is the classic 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So this movie is about two siblings and their friends going to visit their grandfather's grave in Texas when they get attacked by the cannibalistic family and, of course, the killer known as Leatherface. This one is absolutely, like I said, well known by everybody. This one is a very creepy movie to watch even today. It still looks very gritty. It very much looks like something you're not really supposed to be seeing. Like, this could be found, at least parts of it could be found, in some sort of deep southern serial killer's basement or something from waterlogged footage that the police, put back together. It feels very much like that. This does actually have a very comedic side to it, though, too, I would say. There are some very funny scenes in the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at least to me, where you have scenes like, look what your brother did to the door, or, poking the girl with the broom. Some kind of funny scenes there. It's also very tame being called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because throughout the entire runtime of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original one, there's only one person we see actually being physically hit by the chainsaw, and that is Leatherface himself at the very end. That's not really a spoiler. Plenty of people know about this, where Leatherface drops the chainsaw on his leg at the end. But every other time when we see the chainsaw being used on somebody, it's almost always from a back view or from a further view where we can't actually see them, which is a very interesting choice. I imagine they did that to kind of at least get a regular rating on this movie so they could show it in theaters. And a lot of this really still pays off. I really like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I would probably put it up in S tier as well. Very iconic, and definitely check it out if you haven't already. All right, up next we've got The Devil's Rejects. This is the second in Rob Zombie's now trilogy of the Firefly family, starting out from House of a Thousand Corpses. This is following that same group of murderous freaks, I guess. From there, going on just a complete spree of murdering people, doing depraved things, and having a lot of fun doing it. There are some really great performances in this. I really like seeing Sig Haig and Bill Moseley's performance a lot in this. They are very creepy. They are very terrifying. There's a lot of really good character actors in this movie, and a lot of it is very brutal and kind of hard to watch at times. There's two problems I have with Devil's Rejects. One is Rob Zombie's dialogue writing. I don't really care for. I feel like it could be better. I feel like a lot of these characters are very interesting and could be more interesting with better dialogue. That's not really to poke fun at like Rob Zombie or anything. I think that he's a great person and does some really amazing stuff, because I mean everything is shot really nice. All the music is really good for this. There is some parts in this that just don't make the most sense and are kind of dumb, especially on a rewatch. So you kind of have to suspend your disbelief throughout various parts of this. I would still probably put Devil's Rejects. I'd probably put it right next to Tetsuo the Iron Man, really, for different reasons. It's still on that kind of a mixed bag for me. It's not a bad movie. I actually enjoy The Devil's Rejects. That's probably my favorite Rob Zombie movie, actually. But still, I have some problems with it. So, B tier. Now we've got Deliverance from 1972. This is not actually a horror movie, really. This is an action-adventure movie, more kind of drama throughout a lot of it. This is about a group of friends that are going to go river rafting in Georgia, and then misfortune starts to happen, and there's some locals that assault primarily one main character, which is where the most disturbing scene from this movie comes from, and really the only disturbing scene from this movie, and how these characters have to get out of this situation. Now, if Deliverance didn't have that one very iconic disturbing scene in it, this movie would be kind of a fun action adventure, I guess drama thriller type of movie. With that one in it, it does make it very uncomfortable, especially for that one scene, because it does go on for a long time. It does linger on it for a while. I'm not going to describe that scene for obvious reasons, especially since I would rather not get this video demonetized by saying that. But it has outstanding performances. It looks really pretty. A lot of it is really well done. It does have one of the funnest scenes in it, though, too, with the dueling banjos, which I'm sure plenty of people are aware of because that kind of blew up into a meme as well. Deliverance, I would probably put into A tier. Deliverance is a very good movie. I'd probably put it actually at the top of A tier. All right, up next we have I Spit on Your Grave. This is the original 1978 version of I Spit on Your Grave. This is about a writer who is alone in the woods in a cabin, who is then assaulted by a group of 4 men and left for dead, where then she comes back looking for revenge. This is pretty much the original R&R movie. If you know what that stands for in this context, then good for you, I guess. I know it doesn't stand for rest and relaxation. Certainly not. This is another very uncomfortable movie to watch. It has a very uncomfortable scene, very much like Deliverance, except for it prolongs it for a very long time. In the following revenge part of the movie, unfortunately, the special effects have not aged the best in this movie. They look pretty unconvincing right now. This movie was done fairly cheap compared to other movies of its time, so it's not going to be to the highest standard when it comes to practical effects. But even like the blood looks a little bit off a lot of the time in this movie. It is a very uncomfortable movie to watch, but not one of the best ones. If you're interested in this, I would recommend the remake, the 2010-ish remake, I think. That one is better. It is more brutal and it is more graphic. But I'm assuming that's kind of why you want to watch it. It does have better effects and is just as uncomfortable. I would probably put this one into C tier, I think. Up next, we have I Saw the Devil. This is perhaps one of my absolute favorite movies ever. This is a Korean horror movie, action horror movie, actually, that is about a special agent whose pregnant wife is brutally murdered by a serial killer, and he takes it upon himself to hunt down said serial killer. Now he plays a cat and mouse game of hunting down this serial killer. It doesn't take him the entire movie to find the serial killer. He actually finds him fairly quickly into his investigation, and then wants to pretty much toy with him by brutally beating him up, leaving him, hunting him down a few days later, and doing the same thing over and over and over again, gradually causing the serial killer to also, well, I guess go more insane from the paranoia that somebody's constantly following him. This is an incredibly well-made movie with extremely good acting in it. Both of the main 2 characters, the special agent and the serial killer, do an amazing job throughout this. There is some extremely brutal and gory and graphic parts to this as well, even though they're usually not lingered on very much. They happen very quickly. It is a fantastic horror movie, and another horror movie that I would recommend to anybody who has any interest, especially in foreign movies. This is a great one to start out with because it is just so amazing all the way through. Well shot, well directed, well acted. I'm going to put I Saw the Devil at the top of S tier because I really like I Saw the Devil. And then our last movie for today is Angst, or Angst. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this one. This is a horror movie about a man who was recently released from prison, who then goes to attack a family. And pretty much it's a straightforward slasher / gory movie. It's a pretty trashy movie. It's a pretty sleazy movie, but I kind of like it. It's got some pretty decent special effects to it. It's got a fairly simple, a fairly easy to understand story with a pretty short runtime, so it's not that bad. And a lot of it is rather creepy, especially with the main character. Angst is a kind of fun movie that I would probably watch again, but I'm going to put it at the bottom of B tier. It checks really everything that's needed for a disturbing movie and an entertaining movie, for that matter. So I would say Angst is a pretty good disturbing movie. So this was 20-ish horror movies, disturbing movies, ranked. This time we actually got a pretty good spread of movies. If you would like to see more parts of this or other movie-related tier lists, feel free to ask me down in the comments below. I'm sure we can do something to accommodate you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so very much for watching it. If you did enjoy it and you're new here, consider subscribing. That way you get notifications whenever I post any of these videos. And I will talk to all of you guys next time. So until then, stay cool and bye.